Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 of our deep dive into the iPhone platform. In our first video, we introduced the concepts of product jobs and key performance parameters. We defined the job of a smartphone as 3 things: ease of connecting, ease of documenting life, and ease of being entertained. Again, if you're following along, I hope you now have a solid understanding of the product job concept at this point, and that you can clearly define the job of your product or service. In this video, we'll finish evaluating the job of ease of documenting life by assessing it through its key performance parameters. In our last video, we looked at flexibility, starting with optical zoom range as our key performance parameter, but evolving it into a more useful multi-dimensional parameter, size and distance of a detailed image. Again, the lesson here was to ensure that we use the right technical properties to more completely assess performance. In today's video, we'll be focusing on quality and the key performance parameter of crop factor. Again, we'll be using the iPhone platform as an example through this exercise. We'll show why it's important to dive deep down the rabbit hole with your performance parameters to ensure you have proper perspective. And of course, you can expect us to get really technical with the details. Now grab your protractor and side rule, and let's dive in. For the key performance parameter of quality, we are definitely wading into a fairly subjective space, but it's important to find a tangible metric that provides a solid reference for comparison. After considering a variety of parameters, such as pixel size, aperture, and depth of field, I found the most broadly applicable parameter is the physical size of the camera's digital sensor, specifically its diagonal dimension. This is important because the larger the sensor, the more likely it is to accurately capture the details of a real image. Now that's an oversimplification, but we'll also take a look at some other parameters later to validate its use. Now, what is crop factor, and how does it relate to the size of a camera's sensor? We're going to start with a brief history lesson here, going back in time to the 1990s when traditional film photography was still the standard. While 35mm film has been the most popular type of film since the 1960s, a new, more compact option, APS, or Advanced Photo System, emerged in 1996. It never reached the popularity of 35mm film and is now obsolete. However, it did manage to gain limited use in professional photography as the smaller size allowed for more compact cameras. One of the challenges for APS camera designers was whether or not to create an entirely new set of lenses for this new film size. As you can see here, both these sets of lenses use the same attachment method called E-mount, but the APS-C lenses are substantially smaller. While some manufacturers did go this route, most stuck with the same set of lenses. Though this was a convenient design decision for the manufacturers, it created a real challenge for the photographers. Their previous set of lenses would work technically, but they didn't behave the same. Here we see our image size and distance chart from last time. You can see the field of view for the APS-C camera is cropped or reduced by 31%. The fix for the photographers was to use this cropping factor to determine what 35mm film equivalent lens to use. A few years down the road, after the arrival of APS film, and we're at the dawn of the age of digital photography. The first consumer-grade DSLR, the Nikon D1, was released in 1999. When deciding how to size the image sensor for this new DSLR, Nikon decided to use the smallest, commonly available film standard at the time, APS-C. This meant that photographers adopting this new digital device had to use the same cropping factor to determine what lens to use. This ingrained the term crop factor into the lexicon of digital photography, and it continues to be a parameter that is used to relate lenses and image sensors back to traditional 35mm film. To explain how crop factor works, let's take a look at a 35mm film negative, or what would be a full-frame image sensor in the digital world. This film negative, or image sensor, is 36mm wide by 24mm tall, giving it a diagonal dimension of 43.3mm. If we take a look at a similar APS-C negative, or image sensor, we can see that it is smaller, 25.1mm wide, 16.7mm tall, with a diagonal dimension of 30.2mm. Putting these two negatives, or image sensors, side by side, we can see how the APS-C image is the same, but cropped. To calculate the crop factor, we simply divide the full frame diagonal dimension by the cropped frame dimension. In this case, we get a crop factor of 1.44. Now, if we wanted to take a non-cropped picture with the APS-C film camera, we can use the crop factor that we just calculated, 1.44, and multiply it by the desired 35mm equivalent lens size. In this case, 28mm, to get the correct lens size for APS-C film, or 40mm. Now, when we compare these two negatives with an adjusted lens, we get the same image, just smaller. So tying this back to quality, since the film or sensor technology for both these images is the same, providing an equivalent pixel size of approximately 6.5 micrometers for film, it's fair to say the APS-C image will have lower resolution and therefore lower quality. We will continue to use this assumption going forward. A larger sensor means a higher quality image. Now, pixel size does come into play here, and we'll circle back to that at the end, but let's stick with this assumption for now. Moving back to the digital world. Here we see a diagram of various digital sensor sizes. The largest sensor, referred to as a full-frame sensor, often used by professionals, is the same size as traditional 35mm film. This means that it has a crop factor of 1.0. Correspondingly, the smaller a sensor is, the larger the crop factor. Going down in size and up in crop factor, the APS sensors are next, followed by the 4/3 sensor, and in the bottom left corner we see the relative size of smartphone sensors. Zooming in, we can see how the iPhone has progressed over time, with the first iPhone having a crop factor of 9.6, and the latest wide-angle sensor for both the iPhone 14 and 15 Pros being 3.55. That's an almost 3 times increase in size in 16 years. While that is still a ways away from the ubiquitous 4/3 sensor with a crop factor of 2.0, the Pro version of the iPhone is starting to get competitive with standalone digital cameras. Can this trend continue? What other key performance parameters is this traded against? Moving to some charts, we see how the 4 different iPhone camera sensors have progressed over the last 16 years. Looking at the wide-angle camera, the blue circles on this chart, this camera, which has been present on the iPhone since its inception, has steadily increased in sensor size, reducing crop factor, with some acceleration in improvement rate since the Pro Max models were introduced in 2018. This has pushed the iPhone ahead of compact digital cameras and is approaching the quality of more advanced compact digital cameras. As for the other cameras on the iPhone, the front-facing selfie camera, the red squares on this chart, has improved significantly since it was first introduced in 2012. Some other points of note are the recent and fairly dramatic improvement of the ultra-wide camera, the green diamonds, with the release of the iPhone 15, at least for only the base and plus models. Given the most compact digital cameras do not even offer an ultra-wide angle lens option, I think it's fair to say that the iPhone clearly outclasses and displaces the need for such devices. Now, looking at the telephoto camera, the yellow triangles on this chart, we don't see much improvement over time. This is except for the 15 Pro Max model that was just released. Again, this helps with some other quality parameters that we'll touch on briefly. While I chose not to use depth of field as a key performance parameter, it is a relevant parameter, particularly for real photographers looking to create a distinct focal effect in their images. In this chart, we see a relative comparison of depth of field. It shows how much the iPhone platform has improved over the years, with the latest wide-angle and telephoto options approaching the depth of field capability of advanced compact digital cameras. Depth of field is also inversely proportional to the square of the image sensor size. So as crop factor is reduced, depth of field is improved. This is why crop factor is used instead of depth of field as a key performance parameter. Another aspect of quality which is important, but not a key performance parameter, is aperture size. This parameter gives you a sense of how much light the camera is able to take in, making for brighter images and better low light performance. In the case of the iPhone cameras, with their fixed f-stop value, the aperture size is directly proportional to the image sensor size or crop factor. Again, this solidifies the use of crop factor as a key performance parameter. That said, there is some value in looking at aperture by itself. For one, we see the aperture diameter for the wide-angle camera is almost as large as the aperture used by advanced compact cameras. But there's a curious limit here. The diameter has been increasing at a steady pace, but for the last three iPhone Pro models, 12 through 15, we have seen no increase in aperture diameter despite the sensor size increasing. This means less light available per sensor area. Perhaps this means the newer sensors with their smaller pixel sizes don't need as much light, or is there some other physical limit at play? Again, these are the types of discoveries you can make when you really dive into the details. Separately, we see the Pro Max did increase in aperture size. We'll touch more on this later. One final parameter to look at before returning to crop factor is pixel size and the associated light sensitivity of each pixel. The initial trend here for the iPhone was for smaller and smaller pixels. As this increases the total number of pixels for a given image sensor, it increases the camera's ability to resolve a detailed image at a distance, per our flexibility conversation last time. While the initial trend for pixel size was to make them smaller, we see some stabilization with little change and even an increase in pixel size for certain sensors, such as the ultra-wide camera. So what does this mean? Well, let's dive down the rabbit hole here to better understand why pixel size is important, but not a key performance parameter. If you were to take a picture of a calibrated gray image card, and you zoomed in to see what that individual camera's pixels detected, some pixels would see little to no light and would be dark or black, and some would receive a lot and would be bright or white. With the same image, if you reduce the pixel size by half, the average number of photons per pixel would be reduced by a quarter, with the possibility of some pixels receiving no photons at all. This means that the range of possible photons received by a pixel could be 0 for the dark spots to some peak value for the white spots. Now, for an 18% middle gray card and bright ISO 100 equivalent lighting, there would be approximately 410 million photons per millimeter squared hitting the sensor. Using 6.5 micrometers for a pixel size, the pixel size equivalent for traditional film, this would mean a peak of about 87,000 photons for a given pixel when viewing this middle gray card. This would require at least a 16-bit analog to digital converter per pixel to resolve the majority of the range of possible light that it could receive. So in this example, we could say that a digital image sensor with a 6.5 micrometer pixel size would have a photonic range of 16 bits. Now, hopefully you're still following me here. We did get pretty nerdy with those details. Putting this on a chart, we see the downside of using smaller pixels. It means less light per pixel based on a constant photonic density. Less light per pixel means a smaller range of possible photons that can be detected. On the right-hand side, we see a traditional 35mm film with its equivalent pixel size of 6.5 micrometers. This provides over 16 bits of range. And as the pixel size decreases as we go towards the left on this chart, we see lower photonic ranges available, getting down below 12 bits once we get closer to about the 1 micrometer size. Now, interpreting this in the context of the iPhone cameras, we can see how photonic resolution seems to act as a limiter or floor on the pixel size. There appears to be a strong desire not to go below 12 bits of photonic resolution for bright scenes. Putting this in the context of quality, putting more pixels in a smaller sensor is great for improving flexibility, but with a potential trade-off against photonic resolution. That said, there are some fancy tricks using computational photography that can overcome the shortcomings of smaller pixels. Apple is doing this with the iPhone 15, grouping every 4 pixels together to create an effective 2 micrometer pixel sensor size that is used for light capture. They then create a composite image with this information to preserve the detail captured by the smaller pixels while providing a broader photonic range. We define quality as the ability to capture life's moments as accurately as we see them. So this capability is certainly relevant, but hard to define as a key performance parameter. Now that we've performed a thorough study of the possible parameters that we can use to assess quality and validated the use of crop factor as our key performance parameter, we can move on to a comparison between the Apple iPhone and the Samsung Galaxy. Here we see a chart for crop factor for the wide-angle camera for every iPhone over time. I've added the Galaxy S and the Flip and Fold products for 2023 as points of comparison. As a reminder, a crop factor of 1.0 is equivalent to traditional 35mm film camera, so a smaller crop factor is better. For the wide-angle camera, we see that the sensors are essentially the same size between the 14 and 15 Pro and Pro Max and the S23 Ultra, so no clear quality difference here. Since the crop factor for the wide-angle cameras are the same, we can use pixel size and photonic resolution as the tiebreaker. Here we see the S23 Ultra has a smaller pixel size of 0.5 micrometers. This limits photonic resolution to less than 10 bits for bright scenes, while the Pro Max pixel size is 1.2 micrometers, allowing for less than 12 bits of resolution, so better. Looking at the ultra wide-angle camera crop factor, we see some big improvements recently, particularly for the 15 base and plus models, helping them focus on their niche of capturing moments in indoor environments. For the Pro, Pro Max, and S23 Ultra, we see the same sensor size, so again, no quality difference between them. Moving to the telephoto cameras, we finally start to see some differentiation for the Pro Max. While the sensor size has remained relatively unchanged for approximately 10 years, there's been big changes in 2023. Here, the 15 Pro Max is shown to have the largest sensor of any telephoto camera. It is also worth noting that the sensor is 12 megapixels in resolution, compared to the 10 megapixel sensor for the S23 Ultra. For this camera, I believe we can give the 15 Pro Max a win here. It's also worth noting that there's several other important factors that can help break a tie in terms of quality. The image stabilization micromechanisms that Apple has developed for both the wide-angle and telephoto cameras are exceptional. Spatial video will also allow you to more completely capture the moments of your life as you see them. With these details in mind, I'm going to give the 15 Pro Max the gold star for quality. So going back to our overall goal of assessing the ease of documenting life, I think it's fair to say that these two are fairly equivalent products, with the trade-off being between flexibility and quality. If you're looking for a device that can capture the broadest range of life's moments, the S23 Ultra is likely the best bet. While if you're more concerned about capturing your moments in the highest quality, 15 Pro Max is the one for you. Now we will circle back to this question again at the end, once we've had a chance to look at portability and value. We'll see if this assessment still holds true. That's where we'll stop the video today. Next time we'll assess the job of ease of entertainment. I hope you found this interesting and are starting to see how you might be able to evaluate your own products through such a lens. But don't wait for the next installment. Go ahead and give Thompson Products and Technology a call. We're here to help you focus your engineering teams on creating real value for you and your customers. Until next time.